Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Mic, another week with another chat with this week two sportscasters. We're changing it up a little bit this week. Our second live show will be joined this week by Shawn Mullen from Swift Current, formerly the voice of the Swift Current Broncos and now part of the Coaches Parlay team here on ASTV. And then after that, we'll be joined by Darren Dupont of the Rod Pedersen Show. It's going to be a fun one. Thanks so much for joining us here live on your Friday night, wherever you're tuned in from. You can join the conversation tonight as we are going live. You can tweet my personal account at Hodgie Speaks on Twitter for questions and comments to our guests, Shawn and Darren, this evening. And you can access all of our archives of Behind the Mic on our YouTube archive page. That's where you can find all of our shows. And of course, you can find all of our shows all across our social media platforms on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and now Periscope. So we're going to take a quick break here, and we'll be back on the other side with our first guest, Shawn Mullen. Thanks for tuning us in on Behind the Mic. And once again, welcome back to Behind the Mic. Jonathan Hodgson with you, joined now by our first guest this evening. It's Shawn Mullen from ASTV's Coaches Parlay. Shawn, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, where are you joining us from this evening?
I am in the home office in my home in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. My 6-year-old daughter is just in the other room, so I apologize if we get any interruptions. I think we've all gotten used to that in our current COVID Zoom call world. So we'll see. I told her I'm doing an interview, but fair warning.
Yeah, I think we've all gotten used to doing work in different situations.
Oh yes.
So I guess we'll dive into it kind of. We touched in the opening on a little bit of your background, of course, the highlight probably being with the Broncos. But you've been around that Swift Current sports scene pretty thoroughly. So just, I guess, take us into what the past year has been like in Swift Current with virtually no local sports scene.
Yeah, I've been living in Swift Current now outside of a quick 2-month stint in Peterborough. I've been living in Swift Current for over a decade now, and I'm originally from Ottawa. My broadcast career dates back to Ontario, time spent in BC and trail with the Smoke Eaters, and then, of course, the Broncos. So this has become home over the last decade, and it's a very unusual year. You know, the Broncos weren't having a great season, but we didn't get to see the end of it. Didn't really miss out on playoffs, so they weren't going to have it. But, you know, minor hockey teams that were very strong, including the Wildcats in female under 18 hockey, or under 17 and under hockey. They had a fantastic team last season, and we cover them now on ASTV for their home games whenever the season does resume. They had a chance to win a championship taken away from them. You know, they were a team that could have contended for a title last year, and COVID took that away. Almost like clockwork, you know, the Swift Current 57s in the baseball. What is that called? It's changed.
Western Canadian Baseball League.
Right. I was used to WMBL. I used to do some games on the radio back in the day when they were the Indians, but the 57s, like clockwork, have a contending team in that league, and very unfortunate to not have a team and a season this past year, and B, miss out on what would have been Joe Carnahan's last season as the manager of that club. An unbelievable record he had, including a couple of championships, guiding the Swift Current 57s, and he stepped down after this summer. So we didn't get a chance really to see Joe Carnahan coach a team one last time and, bid him the kind of farewell that we would have liked to. It's just been a weird year. We had a little bit of sports activity in the fall, of course, when the minor teams were able to go again. The Wildcats off to a good start, Legionnaires, the AA teams, but that was interrupted again. It's just been a strange year, and it's a community that has a lot of identity tied to sports. Beyond that, I feel for the kids who are missing out on the opportunity to keep developing, playing a sport they love, burning off some of that energy, learning the valuable lessons we learn from being a part of sports. That's the thing that really stands out as what's missing. Not as much the entertainment side, although sports is such a community. You go to a Bronco game, you spend half the time talking to the people around you rather than just watching. So it's the community aspect, the lessons you learn, all that kind of stuff that we miss out on with the sports being inactive right now.
And you bring up the baseball team, and that's a good opportunity for us to go into that a little bit because I have an extensive background in the Western Canadian Baseball League with
you were the broadcaster in Okotoks, right?
With Okotoks, fairly
Public
cordial.
Enemy number one around here.
What was that?
Public enemy number one around here.
I think we get along okay until 7:05, and then all bets are off. But you talk about Coach Carnahan, and he was one of the people that I formed a really good working relationship with from across the field. And gosh, I was there for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And my first visit to Mitchell Field was him eliminating us as the starting pitcher in the playoffs one year. And by the end of it, him and some of his ex-players are forming the coaching staff. And just expanding on that, I don't know how much knowledge you have on the league, but I just wanted to expand a little bit because I know the connection that Joe has to that community. How much of that connection is missing right now in a sports-minded town like Swift, not having these recognizable faces around?
Well, yeah, you think in the summertime, almost the entire team for the 57s is imported from the U.S. college ranks. You'll get some Canadian players here and there, some local players here and there. A guy like Conrad Funk, who toiled with the Indians as they were at the time for years and years as a local guy. You get some guys who stick around, like a Sean Lee, who married a local girl and has made a life for himself here. But those guys, they come and they're very quickly adapted as a part of the community when they're here for 2-3 months, play a ton of baseball in a short period of time. But, they kind of change the face of Swift Current for a couple of months and make a lot of connections with their billet families and the business community and the sports fans. But ultimately, I think, there's those family connections that come with billets for sure. I think the lack of sports, spectator sports, the biggest impact that it has is just a gathering point, right? Whether you're a baseball fan or not, there's a lot of people that go to 57th games that just go to sit, visit, have a beer. The kids are running around chasing foul balls. It's just a chance to see your friends, your neighbors, your family, and enjoy a night out. And we've missed a lot of those different things. Sports is one of them. Concerts, whatever the case may be, just that human interaction beyond just beyond just our home and our family, the opportunity to see the community and feel like a part of the community, something that sports offers us that we don't have right now. And I look forward to having it again one day soon.
Yeah, and expanding it out, to probably the premier team in town, the Broncos. The Broncos, of course, they missed their playoffs, and it appears like this season in the dub is kind of hanging by a thread right now.
Yeah.
At what point, because I personally have reached that in a baseball context, where they've missed a complete season, college programs, summer programs have missed a full season, and now it hinges on, various recovery, from the virus, whether it be the vaccine or whatever. It's not out of the question to miss two baseball seasons now. At what point does it get concerning for some of these smaller sports programs, whether it be hockey, baseball, minor sports, what have you?
I think it's already concerning. At least with the baseball team, you don't have a lot of fixed expenses. So, they're not carrying a paid staff right now. So, they don't have to worry about the financial aspect to the same degree. They don't have to worry about the financial aspect to the same degree as like a junior team that, while they've laid off a lot of staff, they still have to pay staff. They still have some fixed costs, some fixed expenses. I think the baseball teams are a little bit better off that way. You can kind of just put a pause and you're not eating into your income as much, but I can't say 100% what the financial picture is like. I think the longer these things go on, obviously, there's going to be financial challenges. And then kind of the fear of, if you're forgotten for a while, what's the reaction going to be for getting you back?
Exactly, and that's a conversation that I've had with people around Victoria, where in the best of times, Victoria is a competitive market for people's time and for people's money. And there's some that think that when this is over, people are going to be so desperate to come back to sports that people are just going to flock back in droves. And I don't know if I subscribe to that, because people, by the time we're on the other side of this, people have literally developed new lives that don't include these sports teams. So there's no guarantee that there's going to be that flock back to it on the other side.
And so much of what we do in life is kind of just routine. You renew your tickets every year because you always have. It's a part of your routine, a part of your, this is where I visit my friends. This is what I do on a Friday and Saturday. This is how I spend my summer. And I know, having been a sales rep for advertisers, or changed jobs here recently, but having done that, there was an absolute soar of interest in things like travel trailers in the last year. People have maybe developed some new habits. If a bunch of your fans went out and bought trailers to go and have campsites that they're going to spend their summer at all of a sudden, how does that impact a baseball team that expects a certain number of people to attend their games? If you invest your money in other places and get new habits, and is it hard to lure these people back? And then, even after we get to the point where you're allowed to have people in a building, there's been so much anxiety and fear created around the idea of large gatherings, that how long will it take for a segment of our population to feel comfortable doing that again? COVID's not going away. We may get to a point where we can go back into a building, and then you're going to be allowed to, and that the infection rates are lower, but it's not disappearing. So there's going to still be a section of your normal audience that doesn't feel comfortable in large gatherings. There's going to be major challenges for sports once they resume, not just what they've lost. But on the other hand, this is when you have to get creative with your marketing, when you have to work really hard to generate that excitement. We have been stuck in our homes. People do love sports. There's a kind of passion about it, the gathering point that it becomes. So if you do a good enough job when we're getting set to launch, maybe there's people you miss out on because of some of those other factors, but perhaps you're able to draw some new people in. Or maybe there's excitement for a person that normally only goes to 3 or 4 games a year. They've missed it enough, and you're able to reach them in a way that you market your return, that you're able to turn that into a season ticket holder. There's also kind of a rallying point for a community to a degree. We've seen it around some small businesses too. People are concerned about keeping these teams, these businesses, these entities in our communities. If you sell it the right way, you might be able to make that team a rallying point for the community. So it's not going to be as simple as turning the open sign on and then there'll be a flood of people ready to go and take every seat you have. It's going to take work. It's going to take some ingenuity when the teams are able to go again, because there'll be some challenges, no question.
Absolutely. And something you said there about what teams are going to have to do, I think applies when we take it to the context of sports broadcasters. And something that keeps coming up is, what perspective as a sportscaster are you going to have on this time period? Are you going to say, oh, well, it sucks that there's no live content, there's no new games? Or are you going to get creative to see what you can do, see what you can create for yourself? What are your thoughts on in the sportscaster context of what we can do to be better on the other side of this?
I haven't faced it as directly as maybe some others, because this hasn't been my full-time work in a couple of years. The last point that I was working full-time as a sports broadcaster, I can't even call it full-time, when I was the voice of the Broncos up until March 2019. So it's been since then that I've had a defined broadcast job. I've done freelance work pretty much ever since then. So I haven't thought about it the same way, because it doesn't fill as much importance in my income generation, right? So
Right.
I haven't had to be creative in the way that some others have had to be. I think anytime you face a challenge like this as a professional, if you're able to face that challenge and expand your horizons and expand your skill sets and, make yourself a more valuable professional from that process, you'll be better off coming out of it. So if you just sat back and said, well, no live sports, nothing I can do, no points, I'm just going to, put my feet up, and you haven't improved your position at all. And maybe you'll be okay to go back, a little rusty, but the industry will be a challenging one. There'll be less jobs, fewer jobs, less opportunity right out of the gate, I think, just based on the financial realities. So if you haven't been working at your craft and trying to expand your skill set, then you might not be in as good a shape coming out of this as you were going in. If you're one of the broadcasters who said, okay, this is a challenge, I'm going to find ways to face it, to get better, to add to my skill set, to make myself more valuable, to be seen by different people and different entities, then when your normal job is ready to go again, you'll be in a better position. More people will know you, more people will be watching, you'll have a more varied skill set, and you'll be ready to go and take your career to another level. So, you learn a lot about somebody as a professional by how they face adversity.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking with Shawn Mullen here on the first half of Behind the Mic. We have Darren Dupont coming up in the second half.
And there's a guy who does just that. Darren is the kind of broadcaster, entrepreneur, innovator that is going to see a challenge and say, okay, what do I do with this challenge? Rather than, oh, well, nothing I can do. And that's why he's a guy who, instead of having one or two things he's good at, has an entire toolbox full of ever expanding tools that make him more and more valuable. So when opportunities become available to take his career to the next level, he'll be able to say, I've done these things. I give this as an example all the time to aspiring broadcasters. You're never going to just be, not never, but you're very rarely going to just be a play-by-play broadcaster. So if that's all you have as a skill set to bring to the table, then you're not going to win the battle to get the job. When I got the job in Swift Current, they were looking for somebody with experience in the news department to help lead their news department. Not necessarily be the news director, although I ended up being that, but that was a skill set that I had. So it allowed me to stand out from the pack in terms of who could take that job. I also had done some marketing and sales for the Smoke Eaters as a side job. So there are jobs in the WHL where broadcasters do some sales work, like Craig West in Tri-City, as an example. I'd done some PR work for the Smoke Eaters and some work on their website and social media. There are jobs throughout the Western Hockey League where, in addition to being a play-by-play broadcaster, you're the public relations person. Regina is an example of that, quite a few others. So it's important, if you want to get these opportunities, to take on different types of roles that could be relevant to something that you would want to do. If you want to be the person that gets that job, then you want to have the most to offer. If that opportunity in Regina comes up and you have no experience in PR and in writing and in that kind of stuff, how are you going to beat out the person that does? So it's not just being a great broadcaster. It's not just having a great voice. It's what else have you added to your toolbox? And Darren is a great example of someone who just keeps adding more and more tools, so that eventually, whether he doesn't want to, he may want to just keep working for himself. He's doing great doing it. But if that opportunity comes at the next level, whatever they need in addition to his broadcast skills, he's probably going to have some experience doing that. And that's going to allow you to jump at those opportunities when they come.
Absolutely. And in my experience on the baseball side, once in a while, you'd be asked from a friend or whatever, what's your job? What do you do? And my thing very quickly became, it was baseball for me, but I think it's true in minor league sports and low level sports, is if you work for a summer collegiate baseball team, you don't have a job description. You do what's needed at that moment. That could be calling the game. That could be helping out coach. That could be selling tickets. That could be sales. That could be, anything that's needed around the office or the field at that moment.
And that's great experience for the person that wants to make it to that next level, whatever it is. When I was in Castlegar, BC, I worked for both the hockey team and for the radio station. For the radio station, I was a co-host for a morning show. I did sports stories. I did news stories. I produced commercials. I hosted my own sports show. Worked on promotions. And then with the Smoke Eaters, like I said, I did some sales and marketing. I did some public relations, helped run their website and build their website, cut and edited videos, did on-ice promotions with them. I didn't do any real hockey work because that, who would listen to me for that? But made playlists for music over the public address, all sorts of different things, so that you understand the depth of, the work that has to be done. So then when you get to the next level, A, you could do anything to some degree they throw at you, and B, you're going to understand the work that goes in on those other sides, so you'll appreciate the people you work with. It's just great experience to dip your toe in as many things as possible, especially when you're young, don't have kids, don't have a family. You can work 70 hours, 80 hours a week and not worry about it, and get that experience that'll help you when you finally get to the place you want to get to.
That's good stuff. And before we get you out of here and take our first break, I'd be remiss if we didn't have a couple of minutes of story time. I know fans love listening to the stories, and I'm sure you've got a few good ones from your days with the voice of the Trail Smoke Eaters. And of course, I believe 9 or 10 years with the Swift Current Broncos. I guess probably most people would start by asking you about the 17-18 WHL championship run with the Broncos. What do you remember about calling that?
I think the thing that'll stand out the most about that entire experience was just the noise in the building. How there were times earlier in my stint in Swift Current, I thought, man, for a small community that has a passionate fan base, they can be pretty quiet during the regular season. They're an analytical fan base. But when it came to playoff time, I've never been anywhere louder. NHL building, WrestleMania 18, I don't care. The concentrated amount of noise that happened in the Innovation Credit Union Iplex when the Broncos were in that playoff run, especially the championship final, especially Game 6 when they won. I've never experienced anything quite like that. It was euphoric. But there was a lot of anxiety in that run because of how much they had sacrificed to build that team. There was an arms race that year in the Western Hockey League, especially in the East Division. Regina was hosting the Memorial Cup. Moose Jaw was an outstanding team. Brandon ended up selling, actually, even though they were an excellent team on top of that. Swift Current had the best team they'd had in years and years. So all these teams were going after players to a degree that, the prices were sky high. And the prices the Broncos paid, there was a lot of anxiety among the fan base for what the result would be. Because if you paid that kind of price and then had to rebuild for 4, 5, 6 years, and you didn't have success, and you lost to, say, the Regina Pats in the first round of that playoff, can you imagine the frustration and the pain for Bronco fans? They'd lost 3 of the previous 4 playoffs to the Regina Pats and had their season ended by the Pats. To then face them in the first round, go to a Game 7, the anxiety of that game, the tension in the building before that game, and then Regina scored first. If they'd lost there, I can only imagine what that would have been like. So there was a lot of anxiety, and then the feelings that came out of that afterwards when they were victorious. I think there was an extra euphoria that came from that tension being relieved. But what a team. 3 different times in that playoff run, they had an individual player finish off a hat trick in overtime. Have you ever heard of anything like that? Like, that happening one time is one thing, but it happened in the second round against Moose Jaw. Mateo Gennaro did it in a 3-2 double overtime win, only a few days after the tragic passing of his best friend in the Humboldt Broncos bus crash. In the third round, conference championship, despite being booed by his old hometown fans in Lethbridge, Giorgio Estefan has a hat trick, including an overtime winner. Well, actually, he did that in the WHL championship. Or no, he did that against Lethbridge, sorry. He also scored an OT winner in the championship. But he does that against his old team on the way to a huge victory. And then in the WHL final, in Everett, against one of the stingiest teams to deal with in the Western Hockey League's history, maybe one of the top 5 goaltenders to ever play in the Western Hockey League, Glenn Godden gets a diving shorthanded goal to tie a game late and then wins it in overtime with a hat trick goal. To have those 3 individual performances sealed by overtime winners with hat trick goals, 3 different players do that? Unbelievable. Stuart Skinner shut out the Moose Jaw Warriors 3 times out of 4 games in their own building in the second round of the playoffs. One of the highest scoring teams I've ever seen, one of the most skilled teams I've ever seen in junior hockey. There was a kid, this is a funny story. There's a kid who's a Bronco fan who was really excited about going to see those games. 1, because he's a Bronco fan and it was playoffs. 2, because he'd never been to the new building in Moose Jaw and liked the show they had, the light show when the Warriors scored, when it all goes dark except for a big red light that they have when Moose Jaw scores. But he couldn't go to game 1. That's the only game Moose Jaw scored a goal in their own building. So he went to games 2, 5, and 7, and Stuart Skinner made sure he never saw that light show. And to have that series decided that way, where the road team was so dominant, it was just a bizarre series. There was so much to take from that playoff run. It was a spectacular team, so many different heroes, and the community came together. And, something that stands out for me too, just on a personal note, was how everybody was engaged. And while I was just out doing my normal daily routines, how many people I didn't really know felt like they knew me just from me covering that team, and would come up to you and talk to you about the game and the players and what they saw. One time I was driving myself, not on the bus, and I was walking into my house, and somebody just walking across the street yells, "Mullen, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be calling a game?" Like, it was a surreal time to be around that team. And there's no experience quite like a championship run in a city this size. because everybody, whether they're a hockey fan or not, is engaged. Everybody is feeling like they're a part of it. And as much as the pain has come since then for the Broncos because of the rebuilding that's had to come, I don't think anyone would look back, or at least very few would look back and say it wasn't worth it, because it was an experience of a lifetime for everybody.
Oh, that's really cool stuff. And having been around a few championships in baseball, in the baseball sense, you get, like you're talking about, those dramatic moments with the Broncos. You get those in baseball, but kind of the way baseball plays out, you allow yourself to think for a minute, ooh, we have something here. Like this could be something. And I would think in a hockey that those moments would give you that too. But with the dramatics, that like the stakes of overtime, I don't know if you have the ability to allow yourself to think that big picture.
There's moments, like my favorite game I've ever called, I think, is Game 2 of the league final against Everett. The Broncos get down in the series after a stifling 2-1 win for Everett in Game 1, and then get down 3-0 in the first period. And the whole building's deflated, like, you are not coming back from down 3-0 against Carter Hart and the Everett Silvertips. They couldn't even come back from down 2-1. There was almost no offense in the third period of that Game 1. And then they chip away. You know, Mateo Gennaro gets a long shot that finds its way in. Oh, then Colby Sissons scores one early in the third period. And then you just start to feel that momentum, and the beliefs start to build up in everybody. And the absolute adulation when they score with the net empty and just over a minute to play. You feel that building. You don't have time to sit back and analyze it maybe the same way you do with baseball, but you can feel it building, and you can feel something happening. And in a game like that, you certainly could. Sometimes it cuts you off at the knees. Like back in the season before that, the Broncos had a 3-1 lead against the heavily favored Regina Pats in the second round, a Regina team that was supposed to be a championship team that year, and the Broncos were just supposed to be, you know, a tough adversary, but not one that would knock them off. And all of a sudden, in Game 6, chance to knock off Regina. Early in the second period, Glenn Godden scores one to make it 3-1. And it had that feeling. Everyone's like, oh my God, they're actually going to do it. They're going to beat the Pats, the heavily favored Pats, and find a way to the conference final. And then it fell apart. 2 goals allowed in the final minute of the second period. 2 quick goals by Regina early in the third, and the air came out of the tires. So sometimes you trick yourself and you think you have that feeling, and sports can pull it right back.
Well, I could go all day, but we do have some time to keep, so I think
Sure.
we need to head out for a break. But Shawn, thanks so much for the visit. Always fun to talk stories, and I'm sure the sportscasters had fun and learned a little bit of something. And before we get you out of here, you are part of the Coaches Parlay team on ASTV. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's a fun program where we talk about anything and everything in the sports world. I think we're all sick of having to talk about the impact of COVID, but that's just been the natural topic for a long time. And we're all looking forward to, with the different voices, from coaches to broadcasters to trainers to former players, league staff, the different types of people that we have on that show, the variety of opinions. We're looking forward to being able to apply that to actual live sports again. But it's a program that I have a lot of fun being a part of, as a part of sort of the ever-changing cast of characters and voices that we have on that program. And I'm also very proud to be the broadcaster for Swift Current Innovation Credit Union Wildcats female AAA hockey on the air on ASTV. We're hoping to get that going again when sports are allowed to happen again. It's a tremendous program with a long record of success, tons of players who've moved on to the collegiate level. So it's a program I'm very proud to broadcast games for, and look forward to doing that again very soon.
We'll watch for those for sure on the ASTV network. Shawn, thanks so much for the visit.
Thank you for the visit. It was a pleasure. Say hi to Darren for me.
I will. We'll be back with Darren Dupont on the other side. Back here on ASTV. Thanks for spending part of your Friday night with us. Just wrapped up a chat with Shawn Mullen from Swift Current, and now a chance to bring in another one of my Sask friends. It's Darren Dupont from the Rod Pedersen Show. Darren, how you doing? Oh, can't hear you there. We might have to do some.
You'd think I was in broadcasting, right?
Yeah.
You have to unmute the mic. That's tech support 101. Is the power on? Is the mic unmuted? How are you?
We're off to a flying start.
Exactly. That's great.
We're doing good. Thanks so much for coming on today. I know it was a little bit of short notice, but you pinch hit for us coming in the clutch.
Happy to do it, man. I'm glad you asked.
So let's dive into it a little bit. I was doing my homework on you. Of course, we've been acquaintances for a while through our different sports journeys through Saskatchewan, mine through the WCBL, as I talked to Shawn about. You've got a lot of stuff to get into, but I guess the headline project right now is you're part of the team that launched the Rod Pedersen Show, which is taking Saskatchewan and abroad by storm.
It's been so much fun. It kind of worked out that we've had this project to sink our teeth into during the pandemic. I know it started before. It's been 18 months we've been on the air, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It's been interesting trying to navigate it during a pandemic too, but it's certainly been one of the most challenging things that I've done and one of the most rewarding.
Now, explain for the viewers kind of the genesis of how that started, and what your role and what DuPont Media's role in that was.
Yeah, it's funny. Rod and I hooked up a long time ago at Ryder Camp. Well, actually, we hooked up before that, through the Western Hockey League when I was in Saskatoon. And over time, we built a relationship through, he'd bring me on his show, and then we started hanging out as I was covering the Riders, whether it was for Access, and then, a little bit at Griffith Stadium with the show I did on the Huskies. And we started connecting. We started doing more work together. And then all of a sudden, when I was in Regina, he'd bring me in the studio, and our relationship grew. And about to the point where he was thinking about making the career change, I kind of knew this show was something that needed to happen, and it was kind of in my mind. So I started building the studio and getting things going without even Rod committing to doing the show. And as he got more and more comfortable with the idea of it, it just was a natural fit. And he saw what we were doing, building this, and it came together. It took almost a year to put it all together. It probably took 8 to 12 months to put it all together, from idea to launching back in June of 2019. But it's been one of the greatest things that I've ever done.
And getting it to launch is one thing, but what you guys have been able to do from launch till now has been really impressive to watch. You started on Facebook Live, and you can talk me through the stages, but you're now on Game TV or Game TV.
That's right. And we knew that we were going to have to start digitally, and that was cool with live streaming. We had good relationships set up. Our production partners they had a relationship connection through to Facebook, right to Facebook. So we had some proprietary technology that helped us make that decision easier. Things that, integrating the comments and the fans, that was really important. So we had tools to be able to do that. Our stream was pretty secure and pretty smooth. So we went to Facebook, we streamed live audio at Rod's site. And as we grew, that became the job. How do we grow? Where do we go fast? Where do we move to? How do we increase distribution, right? Get in front of more eyeballs. You can't wait for the phone to ring. So we made connections and connected with the guys at Anthem Sports, and they loved what we were doing. It seemed like a perfect fit to have this national show with a Western perspective. And they picked us up, and we're always looking. There's more news coming up in the next, number of weeks or couple of months in terms of more distribution and more growth. And it's exciting.
And you've you've dipped your toe in a lot of different pools over the years and a lot of different sports. I guess the RP show does everything, of course, but a little bit of WHL hockey, a little bit of university football. What was sport number one for you when you got into it?
Sport number one for me was hockey. I mean, when I went to broadcasting college in Saskatoon, playing number one was hockey, and then it was football playing. And when I got the call in 2006 to go to Kindersley, that was my first job, Rosetown Kindersley, and doing play-by-play for the Kindersley Clippers, right in the SJHL. So that was my first, which was a lot of fun. But I guess that was my first. And then from there, I got back into football a little bit, started doing some high school football, things like that. And when I finally moved back to Saskatoon, getting involved with the Huskies and then Canada West and then the Western Hockey League, and just kind of took off from there. But hockey started out for me as number one.
Now you've worked with two of my absolute favorite people.
Don't make me choose.
Business, of course. Sorry.
Don't make me choose.
I'm not going there, but well, if you want me to, of course, we talk about Rod, friend of the show. He's been an amazing supporter of mine personally since we met. Not to make the show about me, but Rod and I met at the top of the stands at Curry Field in Regina. He was doing Sports Cage at the time before a WCBL game I was calling.
Yeah.
And before one of his segments, his producer came down and says, Rod wants you for the next segment. Didn't know him, never met him. Go up there, I figure, well, I can be timid here or I can just let it fly. And I just let it fly, had fun, couple of Stampeders cracks right off the top just to loosen it up.
Yeah.
And it ended up being their best segment of the day. And ever since then, we've kept in touch. And he's been an amazing friend and supporter. And the other one, Les Lazarick. You've done some work with Les as color analyst with the Saskatoon Blades.
Yeah, it's been awesome. And then, working with Les in Saskatoon, I don't know if I'm the problem. I'm starting to think that I'm the problem because the year before I got there, I was in Saskatoon, but the year before I got in the booth, they hosted the Memorial Cup. So I came the season after the Memorial Cup. Okay. And it took us 5 years just to get to a playoff game together, let alone get to any sort of success. And now they just start getting a little success and pandemic hits, season gets shut down. We might get another one shut down here. We're not sure. So I feel like I need to do Les a favor and just stay in Regina. But it's been so much fun working with him that I literally just travel up and down the Highway 11 in Saskatchewan to, go work with Les and work with Rod. And between that and then getting to work with the Shaw team and Peter Labardius and Bill Wilms and Andy Neal, and those guys, Dave Roberts and Grant Wilkins and the whole crew. I've been blessed being able to work with some of the best. It's been such a treat.
Yeah, Lou and Bill, those are two of my favorites as well.
Kevin Sawyer worked with us for a little bit too, and now he's doing the National Hockey League in the Jets booth, on television on TSN. There's so many talented people that have done those games. It's been awesome.
So, what do you learn as a younger guy when you get the opportunity to share a booth with Les Lazarick, or you have a chance to put on a show with a Rod Pedersen? What do you pick up, whether it's approach to your job or whether it's skills? What rubs off?
It's a little bit of everything. The one thing you can pick up some skills, but you have to find your own way, right? You have to have your own voice. You can't try and do this guy's thing or that guy's thing, because you'll always be the guy trying to be this other guy and always never be as good, right? You'll always be compared to him, right? I think you pick up preparation, you pick up relationships, you pick up the way they conduct themselves, the way they handle their business, right? All of those little things. And you kind of pick, like I've always kind of been able to pick and choose. Oh, I like the way that guy does this. I like what this guy does, right? And you start to incorporate these things into your approach and into your life, right? That's the true understanding of what an influencer is, right? That's an influencer. We always think influencers are, social media influencers and whoever has the most followers, but a real influencer, whether it's on social media or in real life, is who actually wants to be like you or be like that person, right? And I look at the way that like they all approach, the job and life, and I picked up something from all of them, and they're all a little different.
And so, who were when you were a kid watching games on TV? Who were some of those voices that you first heard that were either the soundtrack to your little kid fandom or voices that got you into it?
Yeah, Bob Cole and Harry Neal. Those were the two. And it's the greatest lesson for me in broadcasting is those guys, because as they got older and the mind wasn't as sharp and the details weren't as crisp, right? I mean, I think he called Matt Sundin, Matt's Naslund one night. Harry Neal was always pretty famous for, he shot that one from 40 feet, or he was, the distances, and they weren't always that accurate as you get a little bit older, or you don't pick up the names as much. You realize that stuff doesn't matter as much as we think it does as a broadcaster. We spend so much time, and it's important. It's really important to make sure you get the names right, to make sure you get the details of the game, but we're not really there to provide the details, right? I mean, I can get all the info and stats here, right? I have a program. I know the numbers when I'm watching the game. It's about being the soundtrack to the game, right? For me. And so Bob Cole was the soundtrack to the game, right? I mean, when the game was pretty mundane, he'd keep it down here, right? He'd keep it low. And as they moved up into the neutral zone, you get a little excited. So now, the puck's in your own. Now you're paying attention a little bit, right? And now they're over the line. And here they come, right? Like all of those little details. And you get excited. And then he knows when to back off, right? If you keep it up here the whole game, it's kind of exhausting to listen to, right? But it's about being that narrator to the game and tell the story and build the drama, and all of those things. The way you feel watching a game matters so much more than the details.
Yeah. And one of the pieces of your experience that gives me a good question about was you did a couple of summers in Saskatoon at Cairns Field with the Yellow Jackets, and that leads me to a question that I like to talk about with primarily hockey people: is the difference in the flow of a game from hockey to baseball. Yeah. I know the way I explain the difference, but how do you look at it?
They're completely different. I did 2 seasons of Yellow Jackets baseball all by myself, right? And I set it up just like you're like with the online stream and everything, and you put in the work. And I remember, and it must have just been my luck, but as you watch the out-of-town scoreboard, I swear to God, every other game in the Western Canadian baseball was half hours, 3 hours, maybe 350. And our games were always last 4 hours, 4.5 hours every night without a color commentator. Like, talk about pulling at strings, right? To try and have something to talk about. And I'm not a baseball guy.
Yep.
Right. So that makes it tough. And I mean, it seemed like there was a rain delay every night. And it's not like I can just go back to the studio for an hour.
Yeah.
Right? So it became a lot, but it became a lot of fun. And for me, it's, you have to tell that story, but baseball is very much a game full of stories, right? The game moves at a pace where you can tell stories. I think about how a fan enjoys the game, right? I've been to a few, and again, I'm not a baseball guy, but what do? You get there early, you go for a hot dog, right? You kind of look around the stadium, and then you go to your seats and you get ready. When you sit there for the first 2, maybe 3 innings, then you get up and you move around and you go look at the Hall of Fame displays, or you go get another snack, and you spend maybe an inning leaning up on the fence in the outfield, right? And then you go find your seats again for maybe the 7th, 8th inning, 9th inning, right? And you get ready for the end and you gear back. So
yeah. No, I think you nailed it there with in a lot of different ways. Baseball's a lot more experience based, both in the ballpark experience, just like you were saying. I think baseball leans more heavily on that than probably any other sport.
Yeah.
With the experience of it, and I think that translates into how it's broadcast as well.
Yeah.
Because the way I always describe it is, in hockey, the game carries you. It's continuous, then it's a short break, and then it's continuous. Where baseball, you carry the game. It's pitch, 30 seconds, pitch, 30 seconds. And that's where, like you were talking about, that's where baseball on the broadcast side lends itself a lot more to that color, to that personality.
Totally. It does. And it matters too. You have to kind of determine, when is this a moment in the ball game that we need to pay attention to the game, right? Can you sense this being a moment that, okay, we need to forget about joking around and we need to forget about the stories. This seems like it's going to be a crucial part of today's game. We're going to pay attention to the matchup now. We're going to talk about the pitch count. We're going to get into, who's on deck and the situation. But other times the situation's not really that big of a deal, so you can get into stories and the baseball becomes kind of a afterthought, or it's just happening. And it also depends too. Hockey, football, baseball. Do you have pictures? Is it a television broadcast or is it a radio broadcast, right? Because if you don't have pictures, and I see often times, and even on radio too, we want to fill every little piece of dead air. Well, we can let it breathe a little bit, right? If I stop talking and you just listen to the sounds of the ballpark, that's okay for 3, 4, 5 seconds, right? And you can get in there with beautiful day at the park and let it breathe for a few seconds and have a nice pace to it, because it's a nice afternoon and baseball's slow paced. And then when you pick it up, people will pay attention, but when you have pictures, you don't have to describe, he's coming across the blue line on the left-hand side near the hash marks and he puts it, you know what I mean? You don't have to be so descriptive, right? You can be more storytelling.
And I know that only, the top guys have a major league atmosphere to incorporate into their calls. But the best example from that I can remember was the now famous Jose Bautista bat flip home run. It's become known as that in hindsight. That still kind of angers me. Because nobody knew that he flipped the bat until they started running the replays. Nobody knew. Everybody was watching the ball. And of course, the pictures of it are what are more mainstream known. But my day one baseball guy in my career, Jerry Howarth, did the Blue Jays radio for 36 years. His call of it, he called it, and I won't attempt to recreate what he said, but he called it, and composed but excited. And once the ball was gone, 30 full seconds of dead. He just let the crowd go, because that's all you needed. And that's what I love about people like him, is less is more. It's not about, it's not about me making the moment. It's about me communicating the moment.
That's exactly it, right? I mean, and there's no textbook for, okay, when a big play happens, let it happen. And then the next step is to let the crowd go, right? You have to read the room and read the moment and let the moment happen. Sometimes it calls for you to say something, but other times you need to just back off and let the moment happen, and that's the skill, right? Is your ability to be able to not read the story, right, but be able to tell the story as it's happening. And I think that's the skill of a broadcaster.
Exactly. And I can't go a full Saskatchewan episode without talking about the Riders. You've covered them. You've covered them in the past, and of course, anybody in media around there has, I'm sure, been steeped in the Riders, and I've tasted it a little bit. So of course, I was in Okotoks, but we would come over a couple of times every summer. And I remember the one time we had a playoff game in Swift Current, and it was the night of a Rider game, and there was nobody there at game time. And somebody came over to me and said, "Dude, Rider game on. There's gonna be nobody here." And I get out of the dugout at the end of the game, and it was full because the Rider game was over.
Yeah.
So what's the year been like in sports fandom in Saskatchewan with no Riders?
It's been quiet. It's been really, really quiet. And that's the biggest thing I've noticed. Just the way I approach life, like I don't sit and dwell on it. So it's funny, a few times I've been asked, do you miss it? Do you miss being in the booth? Do you miss being at the rink? I don't. Now, when I think about it, it's a fall day, and that's when it was asked. It was in the fall. And when I sat back and thought about the question, I started thinking, you know what? I do miss it in this moment, because I'd be grabbing a coffee and I'd be walking up to the field for the pregame, to start doing my prep. And I love those moments. But day to day, I don't miss it, because I'm like, well, it's not here. So what is here and what can I be doing, right? So I'm kind of only focused on now. But so I wouldn't say that I've heard a lot of people complaining about the lack of the Riders, but I've seen it because it's so quiet, right? Very quiet. Social media is quiet. The show's comments are quiet compared to when the Riders play. It's nuts, right? So it's been really quiet, and that's been a little bit weird, right? And now that we're starting to see some traction in the league with some player signings and things like that, I'm starting to get a little sense of, people in Saskatchewan going a little stir crazy waiting for the Riders to play.
And I think something that lends itself to that, the fact that it's quiet, and I think your outlook on not having live games is a good one, and it's something I've brought up before on the show, but I think it's a valid one that sportscasters can benefit from. Is you can look at it one of two ways. You can say, oh, it's too bad we don't have live games to do, or you can see how creative you can get. And I think, the Rod Pedersen show is the of course the headline example of that. Is you guys in this quiet time are drawing on your and Rod's multitude of contacts to keep the narrative going, keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and to be clear about it, we didn't create the show because of a need to fill a need.
Right.
That's important. As broadcasters, we're broadcasters. What can we call? We got to call something. Or, everybody's at home and wants to consume content. I should create a podcast, or I should do this, right? Or do that. When really it might not be what we want to do. And I think that, with this show, it's what we want to do every day. We want to get up, we have coffee, and we talk sports, and we chat with our friends, right? All the guests that you see on the show are friends, right? more so of Rod than of me, but we're becoming a nice group. And I think that's important. You find something that you love to do and then figure out how to do it and make money doing it, and then you're going to have real success. And I think we all love going to the rink. And, for those of us that are doing shows like this one, and there's reasons why it's successful, because you love to do it. And when you love to do it and you want to do it for fun, it's going to have success. That's the only way it's going to turn into money too, right? If you're going to do it just to make money, it's not going to be as successful, right?
Exactly. And kind of in my kind of what I'm doing during this period was kind of went through a difficult period. Kind of backed away from it for a bit, and kind of the heart wasn't into it for a while, and just kind of got to a point where it's, what, I want to get that back. I want to. It was as simple as I want to remember what it feels like to have fun on air. That's all it was. And Glenn Munford from ASTV, I talked to him about a show concept, and literally I just said to him, what if I call up my sportscaster buddies and just talk? And he said, great, go for it. And from there, a concept grew of a show that, is there to entertain the fans, but also to fill a unique spot to educate the sportscaster. And the other part of that is kind of once that came back, when I'm having the chance to call up Rod and Peter Labardius and the laundry list of people that I have in my phone, which is still just is crazy to me. Is once I got it back, it was all right. What else can I do to get to the next level when I'm ready for it? And my first time through school, it was a combination of not being a good student and, and bit of a rough ride at times. School is just never my thing the first time through.
Yeah.
But now realizing that, all right, we're going to have a little while before the sports world really starts moving again. And the landscape's probably going to look different on the other side. So let's try to jump back into school and see what I can do to upgrade that side. So I just started a sportscasting class at BCIT, and something I'm sure you'll get a chuckle out of. They have guest speakers on every week, and they gave us the name of the next week's speaker, Rod. And when they said Rod, I think I laughed out loud and made an idiot of myself a little bit. But
isn't that cool?
That's
cool. One of the first, speaking of broadcasters and kind of that guest speakers, one of the first guys that I talked to when I was getting into this, well, first, it was Darren Dupont, because he was the Saskatchewan guy, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of how I decided to go to school. But when I had gone to school, I was on a trip out to Vancouver, and I went in and I hooked up with the guys at Sportsnet. I asked if I could stop by, see the studio, watch a show, shadow you guys for a little bit. And that was really great. So they were so good. They gave me their cell phone numbers. I was texting them, and I went for an evening, like a nighttime episode of Sportsnet Connected with Don Taylor. Okay.
Yeah.
You remember Don Taylor and his Simpsons references and his funny voices that he did.
Yeah.
So I go down to where it was, and it's not in a great part of town, the studio. And like, it's dark, and I'm a small town Saskatchewan kid in Vancouver at like 19, 20 years old, right? In the middle of the night. It's like 10, 11 o'clock at night. It's pitch black. But anyways, I sat there in the studio. Don, I'll never forget, it's a great one's doing the show. He's doing basketball highlights, and I'm behind the cameras in the dark, but he knows I'm over there. And so as he's doing the basketball highlights, he comes across this Asian basketball player with a long name, and he can't pronounce it to save his life on national television, right? And he stumbles over this thing, and he looks at me in the corner off camera, and he says, and that's a lesson for the broadcasters out there. If you can't pronounce the name, say it fast and say it slurred and move on. And so he gets out, and it's pretty funny, and I'll never forget that. So you have those moments where you're not sure if you're pronouncing it right, and broadcasters do this all the time. I think that's Dupont or Dupont. Anyways, he's got the puck and he's in the corner, right? Instead of, down the side, Dupont gets the puck and he moves it you just slur over it, get past it, don't dwell on it, move on.
Well, no, that's awesome. And before the show today, and yourself and Shawn pinch hit for us, came in clutch for us when we had to switch things up a little bit due to technical difficulties. So we thank both of you guys for coming on in short notice. But before we went on today, we did do a little bit of Twitter stuff. Posting the announcement that you two were coming on.
Yeah.
And we might have solicited tweets on the Twitter page. So this one from producer Clark. What are Darren's thoughts on M&M's versus Smarties, and why are Smarties the superior candy?
He's a big Smarties guy, and I despise Smarties. I despise them. There's way too much surface area. Your teeth slide across them. The ratio of candy to chocolate's not good. It's way off. M&M's way better, and the mini M&M's are even better than the regular ones. So not close. And we've done polls on this. We've done tests on this. The results are resounding. That M&M's are better.
I'll take your word for it. The other thing was we put two pictures up on our announcement with you and Shawn. One was a little bit of a throwback of you and Shawn working what looked like a Regina Pats game together. Yeah. And then one that I took from your DuPont media site. And there were some comments from the RP show team about bearded dupes and clean-shaven dupes. And the notion of a viewer poll was floated.
We might have to do that on the show. I've kind of been clean-shaven now, although it's kind of late in the day, and I probably am due again. But what's brand new is I shaved this off in the pandemic, and I grew this out. That's never happened, and I would normally not be an advocate for it, and I want to cut it off, but the viewers seem to like it, so we're going to keep the hair going a little bit. But yeah, I've always done the beard in the summer when hockey ends and football's done, right? So when I'm no longer on television, when April, May hits and the hockey season's over, until end of August when football starts and I'm back on TV again, I'll grow the beard. But now I got the hair, but I think I'm going to keep this till the summer, and then that's it, and then I'll get rid of it. But
well, that's a good call.
Pretty good. Do you ever go clean shaven?
No, never. I still haven't figured out how to make this look good yet.
No, you've got the right length. It looks pretty clean. The secret is just clean up the now yours looks good, but don't just let it go. You got to keep the lines clean. So at least it looks like you're growing it on purpose, not like you're homeless.
And my problem is if I take this off, I instantly look like I'm 12. I don't care how old I get. If I take this off, I look 12.
But you don't have any grays in there, so you're lucky.
Yeah, not yet. We're trying not to look too hard for those.
There you go. It's a good idea.
All right. Well, we've taken up enough of your time. Thanks so much for coming on. And before we part ways and shut her down for the night, we'll give you a chance to let everybody know where to find the RP show.
Yeah, you can watch we're on Game Plus, noon Eastern every day. Find us on YouTube. That's where you can go watch it now. Is on YouTube. That's one of our new favorite platforms. So search us out there on YouTube, and you know where to find me. This is great. Anytime you want, I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks so much. That's Darren Dupont from the Rod Pedersen Show. We'll take one more break here on Behind the Mic, and we'll be back with our wrap-up. And once again, welcome back to Behind the Mic. We're back for our wrap-up great chats with Shawn Mullen from Swift Current and Darren Dupont from the Rod Pedersen Show. If you enjoyed our chat, if you missed some of it, you can go to YouTube to check out all our archives. That's where we have all our shows that go up for your future viewing. That's where we keep all our ASTV shows. ASTV is expanding. More game coverage when it comes back, and more show hosts and more shows on the ASTV network at amateursports.tv and across social media on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Periscope. We'll be back again next week. Same time, same place. Fridays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern with another chat with the sportscaster. Thanks so much for listening and for watching today, wherever you're tuned in from. This is Jonathan Hodgson saying we'll talk to you next week.